Hello book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Natcat's Bookish Cafe. Today I am here to do my November reading wrap up. November was another slow month. I once again did not do a mid-month check-in because I had only read 2 books at that point. And if you look at my overall stats, the second half was not much better. So we are going to go ahead and just go through those books, review them. But before we do that, we're going to go ahead and jump into some general stats, which will look very similar to October's. All right. I have once again only read 4 books in the month of November. I will say that I have a DNF and a temporary DNF that I will discuss a little bit in this video. So you'll be hearing about a total of 6 books, but I actually only completed 4 books. As far as page count goes, it is a little bit higher than the month before. I ended up reading 1,171 pages, still on the lower side, but it is over 1,000 this month. As far as audiobooks go, the amount of audiobooks that I listened to was 0. Now, I did technically continue to work on this nonfiction book that I started in October, so I was listening to an audiobook a little bit. I have about 4 hours left. It's 25 hours long. I've just been really chugging through it very slowly, so I am hoping to finish it by the end of the year, but as far as audiobooks that I actually finished, it's a big whopping 0 this month, which is the first time that has happened since I actually kind of started listening to audiobooks, so that kind of gives you an idea of just how slumpy I have been. The good news is that average rating wise, it was a 4.25. So I am rating the books relatively highly. As far as this month goes, 3 of the books that I finished, I rated 4 stars, and 1 of them I rated 5 stars. I'm going to go ahead and talk about the temporary DNF. This is just kind of a book that I think I'm really going to like. It's just the way that the slump is affecting me. It's not the kind of book that I can read right now, so we're gonna go ahead and put it on hold for a little while, and that is going to be City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. This is a book that I got 144 pages into it. I think I picked it up originally towards the beginning of October, got sick, put it down, tried to pick it up again in November, and it just wasn't working for me. I was enjoying the story, so I do know I want to return to it. I just right now can't handle long books, fantasy, world building, all that jazz. My brain is just like, no, we need quick and simple, no brain cells required, no critical thinking skills needed. So I am going to go ahead and put this off until next year. This was one of my Challenge Cup books, same as Babel, which you're not going to see in this wrap up because I did not read it, which means I have officially kind of failed that challenge. I feel like this is a challenge I definitely could have accomplished if I hadn't fallen into a slump in the last couple months and if the last 2 books on my list weren't high fantasy books that required a lot of brain cells to get through, because that's just not where I am right now. So I'm not going to be too upset about not completing that challenge. It was my first time doing it, and I think overall I did relatively well, but I just wanted to let you know we made a little bit of progress this month, but we kind of decided it's not the time or place for a story like this. Then going into the DNF, a book that I spent way too much time on. Honestly, I probably could have squeezed in another book by the end of the month if I hadn't clung on to this book so hard, but eventually I just had to give it up, and that is going to be The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling. I was really excited about this book because I usually like sci-fi, thriller, horror situations. This book was so boring. I got about 50% through to page 224, and as you can see, whoops, there goes my bookmark. It is committing suicide because it no longer wants to be part of this boring story. I didn't even wait until I finished another chapter. I just eventually picked it up and said, no more. No more. This was kind of a sci-fi story where we are following a woman who had lied about her credentials to get onto a mission where she is exploring some underground caves in her planet, which I don't think is planet Earth. I'm not really sure, but these cave expeditions are usually very dangerous, and this expedition is more dangerous than others because they are not just looking for mining material, they are trying to go deeper than ever before. And eventually she realizes that it's just her and the woman that hired her, and it seems that maybe the woman's reasoning for this expedition is not worth the lives that it has already taken. So, you know, we're in a cave, we're caving, we're not trusting the person that we're talking to. This book was very repetitive. I kept feeling like I was reading the same scenes, the same conversations. Our character kept going in these circles where she's like, I'm really anxious. Oh, I know what I'm doing. Everything's totally fine. I don't trust my caretaker. Oh, I kind of trust my caretaker because, you know, she's the only one here and she seems to be quite good at what she's doing. And then she would turn around and be like, I don't trust my caretaker. I don't know what I'm doing. I want to leave. I want to keep going. I want to leave. And it was just like this over and over again. And there were so many times where the author would make these like reveals, and we would even like seem to be approaching the end of the expedition. But like, as I said, I only got about halfway through the book. So I kept having this thought of what is gonna happen next, and not like in a, ooh, what's gonna happen next, but in a, what else can you write? Like, you've completed the story. There's nothing else to put in here. But after having that thought multiple times and the answer always being nothing is gonna happen next, or the exact same thing that already happened is gonna happen next, I just decided I had no interest in continuing this story. I read it for days and days and days, and I honestly should have put it down, but I kept hoping it would turn around and it didn't. So no, thank you. All right, moving into the books that I actually finished. I'm going to talk about these in the order in which I read them because I gave the first 3 4 stars and the last one 5 stars. So it's just naturally from lowest rated to highest rated. And the first book I finished was going to be Crescendo, episode 11 by Cole McCade from his Criminal Intentions series. I honestly feel like I'm tired of giving the synopsis of this series, no matter how much I love it. We got Sanjay, we got Malcolm. They are homicide detectives for the Baltimore Police Department, and they are amazing. I love them. So in this book, I ended up rating it slightly lower. A 4-star is still really good, but I felt like this was a little bit unnecessary. It felt a little bit like a filler, and not like the filler episode where we met Sanjay's sister, where I felt like there was a reason for that, where I was like, okay, we're getting to know the characters a little bit about their family. But the story was really just about our characters solving another crime that was essentially unrelated to the overarching plot. This far into the series, I thought we would focus a little bit more on that. We did start to see some tension between our characters with their relationship, where Malcolm is starting to pick up on the fact that Sanjay is keeping some things from him and he's not really sure how to address that issue. But I don't feel like we really needed to dedicate like an entire book to that conflict starting. But all the same, I always have a great time with these characters, with the writing, so it was still a 4-star read for me. Up next, I did read a challenge book, and that is the final challenge book that I pulled this year, and that is going to be Just by Looking at Him by Ryan O'Connell. Once again, I gave this 4 stars. This is, I would say, kind of like a literary fiction story where we are following a man who has cerebral palsy. He works in Hollywood. He is in a relationship, a queer relationship, but he is not quite satisfied with his life at this point. He feels like he has to be grateful for what he has because it's good for someone with a disability, but he's kind of struggling with this idea of, I want people to acknowledge that I have a disability and that I require accommodations for it, but I also don't want them to treat me like a disabled person. So he's really kind of battling this balance between being treated as someone who has special needs, but also as like a normal human being. And one way he decides to cope with that, which is not the best, is to start seeing a sex worker. He's looking for someone who just kind of uses him for his body. He has a boyfriend who is very caring and really good at taking care of him, but he's like, I don't want a caretaker. I want someone who just bends me over and uses me kind of situation, which obviously leads to a lot of negative situations with his partner, as well as just kind of sends him on this downward spiral of low self-esteem. And he's not the most likable character. He definitely hurts a lot of people as he's trying to kind of like figure out what he needs and what he wants. So he doesn't go about it in the best way. He's definitely floundering throughout this story. I, for the most part, quite enjoyed it. I thought it was very realistic. I felt like it definitely was doing a good job when it came to the commentary on the story of the struggles that disabled people face when they're interacting with able-bodied people and when they're in relationships with able-bodied people. So I thought that his relationship with his partner, the way that that developed, was really interesting. They were definitely the kind of couple that was enabling each other with their bad habits. So kind of watching him trying to like solve his own personal problems without addressing the problems within the relationship, and just showing how that doesn't really work. You know, you have to address all the flaws in your life, and if that means walking away from someone or asking someone you care about to change, then that's just what you need to do. I would say I couldn't quite give it a 5 stars because I didn't love the writing style. The author of the story, I believe, is the writer of a TV show called Special, I want to say. I'm Special? Nope, just kidding. What is it? Yeah, it's just called Special. And I watched a few episodes of that and I could definitely hear his voice in that, but I do want to say that writing wise, it didn't quite work for me. I think that he definitely has a voice that is better suited for television than for novel format. So it wasn't always like my favorite writing style, but themes wise and character growth, and just general messiness of human existence, I think was done really well in here. So I do recommend it. I'm glad I went ahead and read it because it's definitely not the usual thing that I would pick up, but I probably won't pick up something else from this author just because his writing style wasn't 100% for me. Up next, the last 4-star, we have a short story collection or an anthology, and that is Out There Screaming, edited by Jordan Peele. This is a collection of short Black horror by Black authors. I, as usual, rated each story individually and then averaged it. It was a little bit below a 4-star, but I did enjoy this overall. So I did go ahead and bump it up to an average of a 4-star on Goodreads. I definitely had a better time with this short story collection than I did with the last one, which I read, which was the Never Whistle at Night, which was an anthology by Indigenous authors. I don't really know if it's because I went into Never Whistle at Night with very high expectations because I heard really great things about it, and I went into this one with relatively low expectations because I didn't hear good things about it. Oftentimes, you know, your expectations going into a book impact your reading experience of it. I would say my two favored were Dark Home and Flicker. Both of those I gave 5 stars. I think Flicker was my absolute favorite. I didn't put in my little list, which I'm looking at right now, who the authors were, so I apologize. I actually can maybe look it up, maybe, just so that you know. Okay, it was one, okay, Dark Home was by Nydia Okorafor, which isn't surprising because I have read books by them and really enjoyed them. That was kind of like a sci-fi meets myth, which I thought was kind of interesting. African mythology meets modern Siri homes. And then Flicker was by L.D. Lewis, who I'm not really sure if I've ever read anything by them. The name doesn't really sound familiar, but it was definitely giving Annihilation vibes, specifically Annihilation the movie, and I really like that movie, so that story worked really well for me, so I will definitely check out some other work by this author. So overall, I thought that there were some really interesting stories in here. There were some boring ones. I think I DNF'd a short story in here. I've never DNF'd a short story in a collection before, but it was kind of the story that I was reading before I got sick, because I actually started this in October, and I just knew that if I had to return to that story, I would never pick this up again. So I was just like, we're gonna forget about that. We don't want to read that story, and we're just gonna jump into the next story. So I did DNF one, which I've never done before, and that was the aesthetic. I hope I'm pronouncing that word correct. That one just wasn't for me. Do I remember what it's about? Not even a little bit. But overall, I thought I heard someone say that a lot of these stories were really similar, and so it felt kind of repetitive. I did not get that at all. I thought they were all really different and really interesting and focused on different themes that impact the Black community. So I have to disagree with that statement. I definitely think that it is a short story collection that's worth checking out. I just heard a lot of negative things about it, so I just want to give it a little shout out. I'm gonna be out here screaming that you should check this book out, because I think, as always, anthologies are a good way to find some new authors whose full-length novels you want to check out. All right, guys, and the final book that I read this month and gave 5 stars was actually the non-fiction book that I read that you guys chose for me. So thank you guys. You did an excellent job at selecting this book. It was a great time, and that is The Great Displacement by Jack Biddle. Climate change and the next American migration. If you can look here, I gave quite a few tabs for this. Essentially, in this book, we are following different people throughout different climate disasters, flooding, hurricanes, fires, just general erosion of islands and coastal land. And we are kind of seeing how it impacts those people, kind of the steps that the government takes, as well as FEMA, and how these are just the beginning of what we will be seeing in the next few years, to be honest. I mean, I personally nowadays try not to watch the news too much, just for mental health reasons, but I used to watch the news a lot, and it was very common to see people going through some sort of natural disaster. And I will say that this book kind of changed the way that I view those stories, because there was a statement towards the beginning of this book that said, "It may seem reductive to think about a planetary crisis in terms of financial risk rather than human lives, but that is how most people in this country will experience it, through a loss of their most valuable assets, or the elimination of their job, or a shift of where they can afford to live." So as soon as I read that statement, my mind instantly went to the fact that every time I watch one of these stories and they say, oh, on the bright side, no one has died, or oh, we have lost 1 or 2 people during this disaster, and you're like, well, that's such a huge disaster. It's very lucky that we've lost no one, or only a few people. You know, it could have been a lot worse. And you never really think about the fact that these people's lives are irreparably changed. Like, it's just never gonna be the same. A lot of people in these areas will just never financially recover from these disasters, and this book really focuses on that, and the fact that a lot of areas eventually just become too dangerous that people need to move away, and how do we help them move away, especially if they don't have insurance that covers the damage to their homes, or now no one wants to buy their home and so they don't have the funds to buy a new house by selling their old house. And it focuses a lot about the action that the government could take and has been taking that has been not the best, especially when it comes to their decisions of where to build. And also talks a lot about the housing market. It focuses primarily in America. So this is how climate change is impacting homeowners here in America. I will say the last chapter focuses a little bit about climate migrants from the South, where it's like the reality of the situation is that the South is becoming less inhabitable, and we as Western countries need to allow these climate refugees and prepare for them, especially since we are the people that have been contributing the most to climate damage, and it's a very harmful and honestly a little unfair for us to close our borders to these people who are being negatively impacted by our actions. So I thought this was a really great book. I learned a lot, really opened my eyes to a few things. I think that it is a really great book for people to read, especially if there are people who are like, yeah, I can see climate change is happening, but it's not really impacting us yet. Yes, it is. So this is a good book to prove that. I also think it might be a good idea to read this if you are someone who is thinking about moving, because there are a lot of places that are just not safe to move anymore. And maybe it's tempting to move there because the prices are low, but there might be a reason that the prices are low. And also check how much you have to pay for flood insurance, because apparently sometimes you might have to pay $13,000 a year for flood insurance. So yes, I really enjoyed this book. I'm really glad you guys chose it. Really glad that I went ahead and finished it. It did take me a while to read it, so that might have been why I read a little bit less, because nonfiction I'm always a little bit slower with, but this was definitely worth my time, and I think it would be worth your time as well. All right guys, so here are the 4 books that I actually finished this month. If I had to do a favorite, obviously my nonfiction book is going to be my favorite. I do think that least favorite wise, I would have to go with Out There Screaming, since the average was like a 3.7 something. It wasn't quite a 4-star, so it's technically not as highly rated as these other 2 books here, but I still want to go ahead and suggest this book to you guys. But not like the greatest reading month, especially since I had a few books that I started and just didn't have the energy to finish, which is always a bummer. But I do feel like I'm kind of getting out of the slump, which is great. We're here on the 2nd day of December, and as you may know, if you follow my channel, I have a pretty intense December TBR that I'm very excited for. So I'm hoping that I can make my way through that. But I would love to know what books you guys read and loved or hated in the month of December. As always, guys, thank you so much for supporting my channel by watching my videos, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!